Elena Williams had always been invisible in the right way. At 27, she moved through the military compound with the kind of purposeful quiet that made wounded soldiers feel safe and commanding officers forget she was even there. Her brown hair was always pulled back in a regulation ponytail, her medical kit perpetually slung over her shoulder, and her intelligent eyes focused on whatever injury needed her attention. The Navy SEALs of Team Bravo treated her like expensive medical equipment, essential, respected, but not quite human. During mission briefings, she would sit in the back corner, organizing her supplies while the operators planned their assaults. Sergeant Martinez had a running joke that Elena was just another bandage keeper, who heals wounds but doesn't create victories. The other SEALs would chuckle, and Elena would continue sorting gauze and antibiotics, never responding to the casual dismissal. What they didn't know was that Elena's surgical precision came from years of a very different kind of training. Hidden beneath her uniform, she wore a small brass casing on a thin chain, a memento from her brother Marcus, who had been one of Europe's most decorated snipers before he died protecting civilians 3 years ago. The casing was engraved with microscopic text that only Elena could read. Aim when your heart beats slowest. Elena had been Marcus's spotter and backup during their time with European Special Operations. Together, they had worked the most dangerous missions in Eastern Europe, anywhere civilians needed protection from war criminals. Marcus could make impossible shots, but he had taught Elena everything he knew about reading wind, calculating distance, and finding that perfect moment of stillness between heartbeats where the impossible became inevitable. After Marcus died, in a collapsed building while providing overwatch for a school rescue, Elena had destroyed every trace of her sniper training. Her shooting medals, military records, and marksman certifications all went into a bonfire behind her childhood home. She enrolled in military medical school that same month, swearing she would save lives instead of taking them. For 3 years, she had convinced herself that Dr. Elena Williams the healer had completely buried Elena Williams the hunter. She treated gunshot wounds with clinical detachment, never mentioning that she could identify the exact weapon, range, and angle of every bullet she extracted. Her colleagues praised her diagnostic abilities, never suspecting that her knowledge of ballistics was what made her so effective at treating combat injuries. But skills like hers don't disappear. They hibernate, waiting for the moment when survival demands their resurrection. And during her routine medical checks on the wounded SEALs, Elena had begun noticing something troubling. The bullet fragments she was removing weren't standard enemy ammunition. The craftsmanship was too precise, the metallurgy too advanced. Someone professional was hunting coalition forces with methodical precision. She had started keeping detailed notes about each injury, tracking patterns and analyzing the tactical signatures of their invisible enemy. Her medical journal now contained pages of ballistic analysis that would have impressed intelligence specialists. But Elena told herself she was just being thorough in her patient care. The truth was more complicated. The hunter in her was awakening, whether she wanted it to or not. As Elena finished her evening rounds, checking on Sergeant Daniels and his healing leg wound, she touched the brass casing beneath her uniform. The metal was warm against her skin, a constant reminder of who she used to be and the promise she had made to never become that person again. Tomorrow, Team Bravo would deploy to Iron Valley for what intelligence described as a simple hostage. Extraction with minimal resistance expected. Intelligence, as Elena would soon discover, was catastrophically wrong. The mission briefing for Iron Valley should have set off every alarm bell in Elena's mind. But she had spent 3 years training herself to think like a medic instead of a tactical operator. Commander Kruger outlined the plan with the kind of confidence that comes from successful missions and reliable intelligence reports. The target was a narrow canyon where enemy forces were holding civilian contractors hostage. Satellite reconnaissance. suggested light resistance and minimal sniper activity. Elena sat in her usual corner, but this time she wasn't just organizing her medical supplies. She was studying the terrain maps and satellite photos, and what she saw made her stomach clench with familiar dread. The canyon was a natural kill zone, elevated positions on 3 sides, limited escape routes, and perfect sightlines for overlapping. Fields of fire. Any competent sniper team would turn Iron Valley into a shooting gallery. After the briefing, she approached Commander Kruger with her concerns. "Sir, I've been treating an unusual pattern of gunshot wounds from this sector. The ammunition signatures suggest professional marksmen, possibly coordinated teams. This mission profile doesn't account for that level of threat." Kruger looked at her with the patient expression officers reserved for overcautious support personnel. "Doc Williams, I appreciate your medical perspective, but tactical assessment is our department. Your job is to keep our people patched up, not plan our operations." Elena felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but pressed on. "With respect, sir, the bullet I extracted from Sergeant Daniels last week wasn't standard enemy ammunition. The metallurgy suggests European manufacturing, and the fragmentation pattern indicates someone using subsonic rounds with precision optics. How exactly would a medic know about ammunition metallurgy?" Sergeant Martinez interjected with his usual smirk. "You been taking ballistics courses in your spare time, Doc?" Elena's hands tightened on her medical bag. "I've treated enough gunshot wounds to recognize patterns. These aren't random attacks, someone systematically targeting our personnel with professional-grade equipment." The room went quiet for a moment before Kruger spoke again. "Dr. Williams, your medical expertise is invaluable to this team, but intelligence analysis isn't your area. We have specialists for that. I need you focused on your primary mission: keeping our operators healthy and combat ready." Elena nodded and stepped back, but her mind was racing. She had seen this dismissive attitude before, in the European theater, where commanders refused to listen to intelligence that contradicted their preconceptions. Marcus had always said that the most dangerous missions were the ones where leadership ignored warnings from people who actually understood the enemy. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She found herself in the base's communication center, using her medical clearance to access casualty reports from the past month. What she found confirmed her worst fears. 7 coalition casualties in the Iron Valley sector, all from long-range precision fire. The wound patterns told a story that intelligence reports had missed. There wasn't just one sniper operating in that area. There was a coordinated team of at least 3 marksmen working in calculated shifts. She spent hours creating a detailed analysis of the tactical signatures, mapping probable shooting positions and calculating fields of fire. By dawn, she had identified what she believed to be a command post approximately 3 kilometers north of the target zone, positioned to coordinate sniper teams and direct them to optimal positions for maximum damage. Elena printed her analysis and delivered it to Commander Kruger's office before the morning briefing. His aide promised to pass it along, but Elena could see in his expression that it would probably end up in the trash. To them, she was just an overcautious medic stepping outside her lane. As Team Bravo prepared for deployment, Elena made sure her medical kit was perfectly organized. But in the deepest compartment, hidden beneath layers of gauze and surgical instruments, she secured a small wrapped object, an advanced scope mount she had extracted from a British operative's wound. 2 weeks earlier, it was military-grade hardware that didn't come from local weapons dealers, proof that their enemies were receiving professional support. She also checked the brass casing around her neck one more time, reading Marcus's engraved message with her fingertips. "Aim when your heart beats slowest." Her brother had taught her that true snipers weren't made in military schools. They were forged by necessity and refined by loss. Elena prayed she would never need to remember those lessons, but something deep in her gut told her that Iron Valley was going to test everything she had tried to leave behind. As the helicopters spun up for transport, Elena took one last look at the base. By evening, she would either be treating routine injuries from a successful mission, or she would be forced to decide whether her oath to save lives was stronger than her promise to never kill again. The brass casing grew warm against her skin. As her heart rate began to rise, Iron Valley looked exactly as dangerous as Elena had feared. The narrow canyon stretched between rocky walls that rose like natural ramparts on three sides, creating the perfect amphitheater for methodical slaughter. As Team Bravo's helicopters approached the landing zone, Elena pressed her face to the small window and automatically began calculating sightlines and fields of fire, old habits that 3 years of medical training hadn't been able to erase. "Commander," Kruger's voice crackled through their headsets as they touched down. "Remember, intelligence indicates light resistance. We're expecting scared locals with old weapons, not professional opposition. In and out, clean and simple." Elena secured her medical pack and followed the team toward their objective, staying 50 meters behind the primary assault group as protocol demanded. But her eyes weren't focused on potential casualties. They were scanning the ridgelines and elevated positions where Marcus had taught her to look for the subtle signs of concealed shooters. The displacement of shadows, the unnatural angles of metal reflecting sunlight, the tiny movements that betrayed human presence where only rock should exist. The first shot came from an impossible angle, and Elena knew immediately that her worst predictions had come true. Sergeant Williams dropped instantly, blood blooming across his shoulder as the crack of a subsonic round echoed through the canyon. Elena was moving before the sound faded, her medical training overriding every survival instinct she possessed. "Medic! Down! Fall back!" Commander Kruger shouted, but Elena was already sliding across broken concrete toward Williams, her body automatically following movement patterns that had nothing to do with medical school and everything to do with combat survival. Bullet cracked past her head so close she felt displaced air, then another, striking the wall where she had been positioned moments before. These weren't random shots from panicked fighters. Someone was specifically targeting the medic with calculated precision, trying to eliminate Team Bravo's medical support before finishing off the operator's dot as Elena pressed gauze against Williams's wound. Her mind automatically processed the acoustic signature of the gunfire. Subsonic rounds, suppressed rifle, approximately 800 meters, range from an elevated position. The shooter was northeast, probably on the ridge overlooking their position behind some kind of concealment that provided both cover and excellent sightlines. "Kruger," she called out while working on Williams. "Sniper on the northeast ridge, 800 meters out. We don't have visual confirmation, but he's using professional equipment and he knows exactly what he's doing." "Focus on Williams," Kruger replied, scanning through his scope. "We can handle tactical assessment." But Elena was already seeing what the others missed. The bullet impacts weren't random. They were creating a pattern, herding Team Bravo toward a predetermined kill zone. In 30 seconds, they would be completely exposed to coordinated fire from multiple positions. Williams grabbed her arm, his face pale with shock and blood loss. "Doc, you need to get out of here. This isn't medical work. This is a professional hit." A third shot shattered concrete inches from Elena's position, and this time she saw the muzzle flash. Ridgeline, behind the twisted metal remains of a radio tower. Not one sniper. 3 of them, working in perfect coordination, exactly as her analysis had predicted. Elena's hands moved toward Williams's rifle, then stopped. She had sworn never to take another life. She had built her entire identity around healing instead of harming. Another shot found Sergeant Daniels, spinning him around as he tried to reposition. Time seemed to slow as Elena watched him fall, blood spreading across his combat vest. Her medical training screamed at her to help Daniels, but her deeper training, the knowledge Marcus had burned into her soul, whispered something else entirely. If she didn't act now, they would all die. Elena's hands closed around Williams's rifle, and the weapon felt like coming home. The rifle felt wrong and right at the same time. Elena's hands remembered every detail. The weight distribution, the balance point, the way the stock should nestle against her shoulder for maximum stability. It was a weapon identical to the one she had used during her years with European Special Operations, back when she and Marcus had been ghost partners moving through the mountains of Eastern Europe. But 3 years of medical training had changed her perspective on what firearms really meant. Every bullet she had extracted, every wound she had stitched, every life she had fought to save had reinforced her conviction that weapons were tools of destruction. Now, holding Williams's rifle while Daniels bled 50 feet away, Elena felt the fundamental contradiction of her existence crystallizing into a single moment of choice. "Elena!" Kruger's voice cut through her internal struggle. "We need medical support, not another shooter. Help Daniels." Elena looked at Daniels, then at Williams, then at the ridgeline where professional killers were systematically destroying her team. In her mind, she could hear Marcus's voice from their final training session. "The rifle doesn't make you a sniper, Elena. The ability to slow time when everyone else speeds up. That's what makes you deadly." Her body shifted into the shooting position she hadn't used in 3 years. Left hand forward on the grip, right hand high on the stock, cheek pressed against the cold metal. The scope's crosshairs found the ridgeline, and Elena's breathing automatically began to slow. Her heart rate dropped. The chaos of battle faded into background static, and she found herself in that perfect moment between heartbeats where Marcus had taught her the impossible became inevitable. Breathe in, pause, breathe out, pause. In that pause, find the still point. First target, movement behind the radio tower. Range 847 meters, wind minimal left to right, elevation 12 degrees. The crosshairs settled with mechanical precision. Elena's finger found the trigger, applying pressure with the same controlled movement she used for delicate surgical procedures. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. 800 meters away, the first sniper pitched backward and disappeared from view. Before his body hit the ground, Elena was already acquiring the second target. The coordination between the enemy marksmen told her exactly where the others would be positioned. Standard sniper team doctrine, triangular formation with interlocking fields of fire. Second shot. The enemy spotter dropped his binoculars and slumped over his position. The third sniper, realizing his team was compromised, tried to relocate. Elena tracked his movement through the scope, leading his path by 3 meters to account for his speed and direction. Third shot. Silence. Jesus Christ, Kruger's voice cut through the sudden quiet. 3 targets, 3 shots, under 15 seconds. Williams, where the hell did your medic learn to shoot like that? Elena set the rifle down carefully, her hands now shaking as adrenaline began to fade. She looked at Williams, who was staring at her with something between amazement and fear. Then she picked up her medical bag and moved toward Daniels, who was still bleeding but very much alive. "My brother taught me," she said quietly while examining Daniels's wound, "that some problems can't be solved with medicine alone." As she worked on Daniels, Kruger approached with an expression she couldn't read. "That third shot, you bounced it off a steel beam to hit the target behind cover. That's not something you learn in basic training, Doc." Elena didn't look up from her work. "I grew up in the mountains. Sometimes the only way to feed your family is to take shots that shouldn't be possible." But privately, she was touching the brass casing beneath her uniform. Marcus had always said that true snipers weren't made in military schools. They were forged in childhood, shaped by necessity and refined by loss. After the immediate wounded were stabilized, Elena found herself staring at her hands. They had transitioned from surgical instruments to weapons of precision and back again without hesitation. The boundary she had built between healer and hunter had dissolved in seconds, and Elena wasn't sure if that terrified her or relieved her. Williams struggled to sit up despite his injury. "Doc, I've got to ask, before today, when's the last time you fired a rifle?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, calculating exactly. 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago. "That's impossible. Nobody maintains accuracy like that without practice." Elena looked at him with those deep, complicated eyes that had always held secrets the SEALs never noticed. "Some skills never leave you, Williams. They just wait on the ground until someone you care about is in danger." The mission was far from over, but something fundamental had changed. The SEALs weren't looking at her the same way anymore, and Elena wasn't sure she was looking at herself the same way either. The quiet medic who had deployed to Iron Valley that morning was gone forever, replaced by someone who had finally stopped running from who she really was. The immediate threat was neutralized. But the mission continued, and Elena found herself in an impossible position. She had saved her team by embracing the skills she had sworn to abandon. And now Commander Kruger was looking at her like she was a puzzle that needed solving. As Team Bravo regrouped and secured their position, Kruger pulled Elena aside to a protected corner of the canyon. "I need to know who you really are," he said quietly. "Those weren't lucky shots. That was professional-level marksmanship with tactical awareness that goes way beyond medical training. So let's start over, Doc. Who was Elena Williams?" Elena sat on a piece of rubble, finally ready to share the truth she had buried for 3 years. The weight of maintaining her carefully constructed identity had become exhausting, and after what had just happened, there seemed little point in continuing the deception. "Before I was a medic, I was part of European Special Operations," she began, touching the brass casing at her throat. "My brother Marcus and I were a sniper team. He was primary, I was spotter and backup. We worked the Balkans, Eastern Europe, anywhere civilians needed protection from war criminals and militants who thought they were untouchable." Kruger listened intently as Elena continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke about the life she had abandoned. "Marcus was extraordinary. He could make shots that defied physics, but he taught me everything he knew. Wind reading, range, calculation, target psychology, and most importantly, how to find the calm center when everyone else is panicking." The rest of Team Bravo had gathered around now, listening to this revelation from their quiet medic who had just demonstrated skills that belonged in legend rather than reality. Elena closed her eyes, lost in memories that still caused physical pain. "Our last mission was a hostage rescue. Civilians trapped in a bombed-out school, surrounded by militants who were using children as human shields. Marcus took position on a rooftop to provide overwatch while the extraction team went in. Her voice grew quieter, more strained. There were kids in that school, maybe 8 years old, maybe younger. The militants thought they were safe because they had human shields, but Marcus ... He had 17 confirmed kills that day. 17 militants who thought they were protected by innocent children. Elena paused, struggling with words that still felt like broken glass in her throat. He was clearing the path for the rescue team when a rocket-propelled grenade hit his building. The entire structure collapsed. I watched my brother, the best sniper Europe had ever produced, guy protecting children he would never meet. Daniels, still bandaged but mobile, spoke up from where he was resting. "But you kept the skills." "You can't unlearn what's been burned into your soul," Elena replied. "Every time I treated a gunshot wound, I could tell you exactly what caliber, what range, what angle. My surgical precision came from years of trigger control. But I convinced myself I'd never need those skills again. I thought I could bury the hunter and become only the healer. Williams, still pale but recovering, asked the question everyone was thinking. So what changed today? Elena looked at each of them in turn. These men who had become her brothers in arms, who had trusted her with their lives and their wounds. You did. When I saw Daniels go down, when I realized you were all going to die because of my oath to never kill again, I understood that sometimes to save lives, you have to take them. She pulled out her medical journal, flipping to pages filled with detailed ballistic analysis and tactical observations. I've been tracking sniper activity in this region for weeks. The bullet fragments I've been removing from wounded soldiers told a story. Professional marksmen, possibly foreign mercenaries, systematically targeting coalition forces. Kruger examined her notes with growing amazement. This is intelligence-level analysis. Why didn't you report this through proper channels? Because I was a medic, Elena said simply. It wasn't my job to be an intelligence analyst. Except Marcus always taught me that understanding your enemy is the first step to defeating them, and I've been understanding our enemy better than anyone wanted to admit. Elena stood up, brushing dust off her uniform with hands that no longer shook. Those 3 snipers today weren't random fighters. They were part of a larger network, professional hunters being paid to eliminate high-value targets. And if my analysis is correct, their command post is approximately 3 kilometers north of here, coordinating multiple sniper teams throughout this entire sector. The implications were staggering. Elena hadn't just saved their lives today. She had uncovered evidence of a sophisticated enemy operation that intelligence had completely missed. But more than that, she had finally stopped running from the fundamental truth about who she was and what she was capable of when the people she cared about were in danger. There's one more thing, Elena continued, her voice carrying a new note of authority that none of them had heard before. They know their sniper team is compromised now. They'll either retreat or escalate, and based on everything I've observed about their operational pattern, I don't think they're the retreating type. As if summoned by Elena's prediction, the radio crackled to life with an urgency that sent ice through everyone's veins. Intelligence reports were flooding in about massive enemy movement converging on Iron Valley from 3 different directions. What had started as a simple hostage extraction was rapidly becoming a full-scale battle, and Team Bravo was positioned at the center of what appeared to be a carefully orchestrated trap. "This is command," the radio squawked. "Intelligence indicates approximately 60 hostiles moving to surround your position. Extraction helicopters are 40 minutes out, but hostile forces will reach you in 15. You need to hold that position until we can get you out." Elena felt a familiar chill as she processed the tactical situation. 60 hostiles against 8 SEALs, in a canyon that provided excellent cover for attackers and limited escape routes for defenders. It was exactly the kind of impossible situation that Marcus had trained her to handle, but that had been when she was a professional operator, not a medic trying to reconcile 2 conflicting identities. Commander Kruger made a command decision that would have been unthinkable that morning. "Elena, I know you swore off killing, but we need that sniper covering our extraction route. Those skills of yours might be the only thing standing between us and a massacre." Elena was quiet for a long moment, touching the brass casing that had become warm against her skin. Then she looked at the wounded soldiers around her, men she had treated, men she had grown to care about, men who would die if she chose medical ethics over military necessity. "Marcus used to say that every bullet has a purpose," she said finally. "Some bullets wound, some kill, but the most important bullets are the ones that protect." She picked up Williams's rifle again, checking the magazine and adjusting the scope, with movements that were becoming more natural by the hour. Today my bullets protected my family. The radio crackled again with increasingly urgent updates. Enemy reinforcements were 6 minutes out and closing fast. Elena found her shooting position overlooking the valley approach, a rocky outcrop that provided excellent sightlines and reasonable cover. As she settled into position, she felt the last of her internal resistance dissolving. "I need 2 minutes to zero the scope and calculate wind patterns," she called back to the team. "After that, I'm not just Elena the medic anymore. I'm Elena Williams, and my brother taught me that some people only understand one language." The sound of distant vehicles echoed through the valley, trucks and motorcycles carrying professional fighters who thought they were about to slaughter 8 isolated Americans. Elena's breathing became controlled, her heart rate slowed, and she felt herself slipping into the hunter's trance that had once made her one of Europe's most effective snipers. Through her scope, she could see the lead vehicle approaching the valley entrance. In the passenger seat sat a man with expensive optics and tactical gear that confirmed her analysis. These weren't local fighters. They were professional mercenaries with military-grade equipment and coordination. "First vehicle approaching the north entrance," she reported calmly. "Driver and 3 passengers, all armed with automatic weapons. Range 400 meters and closing." Elena's first shot took out the front tire, sending the lead vehicle spinning into a boulder and blocking the narrow entrance for the vehicles behind it. Her second and third shots eliminated the 2 fighters who tried to set up a machine gun position on the disabled truck. "North entrance sealed," she reported. "They'll have to come in on foot now, which gives us better defensive positioning." But Elena knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when the enemy fighters realized they were facing someone with professional-level skills and began coordinating their assault accordingly. She had bought Team Bravo time and tactical advantage, but the fight was far from over. As she prepared for the prolonged engagement ahead, Elena touched the brass casing one more time. Marcus had always said that the most important battles weren't about personal survival. They were about protecting the people who counted on you to be everything they needed when they needed it most. Elena was finally ready to be everything her team needed, whatever that required. The extraction lasted 4 hours, and it became the longest sustained sniper engagement Elena had ever experienced. What started as protective fire evolved into something approaching warfare as enemy reinforcements continued flowing into Iron Valley from multiple directions. Elena found herself transitioning between roles: medic when someone needed emergency treatment, sniper when threats appeared in her scope, and tactical coordinator when Team Bravo needed someone who understood how professional fighters thought and moved. Her position on the rocky outcrop provided commanding views of 3 approach routes, and Elena used every technique Marcus had taught her about controlling terrain through precision fire. She didn't shoot to kill when wounding would accomplish the same tactical objective. A fighter with a shattered shoulder or leg became a burden on his unit, requiring 2 or 3 others to evacuate him and reducing overall combat effectiveness. "Target at 700 meters, second ridge," she would call out calmly between shots. Spotter with laser designator trying to coordinate mortar fire, eliminating threat. Elena's shooting was methodical, almost surgical. She would identify high-value targets, communications equipment, heavy weapons, leadership figures, and systematically remove them from the battlefield. Her medical training helped her understand exactly how to disable rather than kill when the folding kill tactical situation allowed for such precision. But as the hours wore on and enemy pressure intensified, Elena found herself making the kinds of shots that left no room for medical mercy. When a group of fighters tried to flank Team Bravo's position using civilian hostages as cover, Elena's rounds found the narrow gaps between innocent bodies with accuracy that bordered on the supernatural. "How is she making those shots?" Daniels asked during a brief lull, watching Elena track a target moving between buildings 800 meters away. "Training and necessity," Kruger replied, but his voice carried a new note of respect that hadn't been there that morning. "She's not just shooting. She's controlling the entire battlefield from one position." Elena heard their conversation, but didn't respond. She was deep in the hunter's trance now, completely focused on reading terrain and predicting enemy movement patterns. Through her scope, she could see the enemy commander, a tall man with expensive equipment, who was directing his fighters with the kind of tactical sophistication that confirmed their worst suspicions about who they were really fighting. When the extraction helicopters finally appeared on the horizon, Elena had made 37 shots at ranges between 400 and 1,200 meters. 37 threats eliminated, 0 coalition casualties after she took overwatch position. But she didn't think about the numbers as she helped load the wounded onto the helicopters. Elena quietly secured her borrowed rifle, checked her medical supplies one final time, and took her seat for the flight back to base. The only difference in her routine was the way Team Bravo looked at her now, not as support personnel who happened to carry medical equipment, but as someone who had proven she would do anything necessary to bring them home alive. Williams, his arm in a sling but otherwise recovered, leaned over during the flight back. "Doc, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer." Elena nodded, too exhausted for evasion. "When we were pinned down and you picked up that rifle, were you scared?" Elena considered the question carefully before responding. "I was. Terrified. Not of the shooting or the danger, but of becoming someone I'd sworn I would never be again. But then I realized that fear was selfish. You were going to die because I was more worried about my moral purity than your actual survival." She looked out the helicopter window at Iron Valley receding below them. "Marcus always said that fear isn't about what might happen to you. Real fear is about what might happen to the people you've sworn to protect. Today, I remembered the difference." When they landed at base, Elena followed her normal routine exactly. She restocked her medical supplies, filed her casualty reports, and prepared for the next day's assignments. The only change was a single line she added to each report: threat assessment and neutralization conducted as required. But Elena knew that everything had changed. The quiet medic who had deployed that morning was gone forever, replaced by someone who finally understood that healing and protecting weren't contradictory impulses. They were different expressions of the same fundamental commitment to preserving life by any means necessary. Word spread through the special operations community like wildfire. Within days, every branch of military service had heard about the quiet medic who transformed into a ghost sniper in the span of heartbeats. Elena tried to return to normal routine, reporting to the medical tent each morning, treating wounded soldiers, organizing supplies, and conducting health assessments, but everything had fundamentally changed. Soldiers, who had never spoken to her before, now approached with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Some wanted to know about her techniques. Others simply wanted to thank her for keeping them alive during operations they would never officially discuss. Elena deflected most of the attention with her standard response: "I did what was necessary." But Team Bravo wouldn't let her fade back into anonymity. 3 days after Iron Valley, Daniels appeared in her medical tent carrying a small wooden box. "The team wanted you to have this," he said, setting it on her desk. Inside were 3 brass casings, each one engraved with a single word: medic, sniper, and sister. Elena picked up each one, turning them over in her hands and feeling the weight of what they represented. "These are from your shots that day," Daniels explained. "The ones that saved Williams, me, and probably all of us. We had them engraved because we wanted you to understand something important." Williams appeared in the tent entrance, his arm still in a sling but his expression serious. You asked us once why we called you sister instead of just medic or sniper. It's because that's what you are now. Family. And family looks out for family, whatever that requires. Elena held up the casing marked sister, reading the engraved word with her fingertips the same way she read Marcus's original message. There's something else, Williams continued. Command wants to debrief you about the intelligence you gathered. Turns out your analysis about the command post was exactly right. They found it precisely where you predicted, along with evidence of a much larger operation than anyone suspected. And there's talk about cross-training opportunities, Daniels added. Intelligence analysis, counter-sniper operations, tactical coordination. You've proven you have skills that go way beyond traditional medical support. Elena looked up sharply. I'm not interested in becoming a full-time sniper again. What happened at Iron Valley was necessary, but it doesn't change who I fundamentally am. Doesn't it? Williams asked gently. You saved 30+ lives that day, not just with medicine, but with precision fire. That's who you are, Elena. Someone who saves lives by any means necessary. That evening, Elena found herself at the base's shooting range, not to practice, but to think. She had set up a small memorial on one of the shooting benches. Marcus's photo, the original brass casing he had given her, and now the 3 new ones from Team Bravo. The collection represented the integration of 2 identities she had thought were mutually exclusive. Commander Kruger found her there an hour later. Having second thoughts? He asked. No, Elena replied. I'm having first thoughts. For the first time in 3 years, I'm thinking clearly about who I really am instead of who I thought I should be. She gestured to the memorial. Marcus didn't die fighting for a country or an ideology. He died protecting innocent people. Yesterday, I remembered that protecting people is what we both signed up for. The method doesn't matter as much as the result. Elena picked up the brass casing marked sister and slipped it onto the chain with Marcus's original. 2 pieces of metal representing 2 parts of her identity that had finally learned to coexist without contradiction. So what happens now? Kruger asked. Now I go back to being a medic, Elena said, shouldering her medical bag. But when soldiers under my care are threatened, I'll be whatever they need me to be. On the shooting range wall, someone had written in permanent marker, sometimes the one who saves lives is also the one who removes the threat. Elena read the words and nodded. It was a truth that had taken her 3 years and 1 impossible day to fully understand. As she walked back toward the medical tent, Elena touched both brass casings beneath her uniform. Marcus's message about aiming when the heart beats slowest, and Team Bravo's acknowledgement that she was family worthy of protection and capable of providing it. For the first time since her brother's death, Elena Williams felt complete. She was a healer who could hunt when necessary, a medic who could snipe when required, and most importantly, a sister who would do anything to bring her family home alive. Iron Valley had taught her that these identities weren't contradictions. There were different facets of the same fundamental commitment to preserving life by any means necessary. Elena had finally stopped running from who she really was, and they, people who mattered most, had welcomed her home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.